This is chapter 1 of Fenwraith, and although it starts off sounding like it's it's aimed at children, I can assure you it's not. It's just that this is the backstory to one of the characters, and it's through the eyes of him as a child. You'll see towards the end it does get a little dark, so not intended for children, nor is the rest of the book. Do you want to be friends? The 12-year-old asked the 8-year-old, while a sheepish-looking stocky boy looked on. Yes, the little one replied eagerly. You can join our gang if you like. What's a gang? The little one asked gingerly. We're a secret gang of pirates, the other said, not really offering an expansion to the question. The little one knew what pirates were, and was smart enough through the context to understand that he was to become a play pirate with his two new friends. We have a ship, and we know where some treasure is buried. On an island near the rafters. Oh, I'm not allowed, Dad said, the little one chimed. The other two laughed at him. Ah, little baby, not allowed to play, they teased him. You know real pirates never do what they're told anyway. Never mind. Go home, little boy. I can still be your friend though, can't I? He asked with disappointment in his heart. We can still be pirates here. Finally the stocky boy chipped in with his own merit. A pirate that can't go on a boat, he mocked. I'm just not allowed to play near water until I'm 13, the little one pleaded. The bigger boy turned to the stocky one with a mischievous glint in his eyes. Nobody will know. We're a secret gang, aren't we? You can't tell anyone. The stocky boy looked the little one dead in the eyes. Dead secret, he claimed ominously. Right, well if you want to join our gang, then you have to go through the initiation ceremony, the big boy declared. Come on. And the two started to walk in what the little one knew was the direction of the rafters, a man-made channel that led through one of the many rivers of the veins through the edges of the moors. We'll catch some muggy ends and eat them to survive, the stocky boy said excitedly. We'll make some spears and hunt them, the boy, who now decided he was captain, agreed. By this time, the little one had resolved to go along with the other two as far as he felt comfortable. He was at that age when he was a little confident, expanding his world and questioning the orders of his father in favour of things he thought he could get away with. My name's Murray. What's yours? The little one asked the other boys. You can call me Captain, as I'm the captain of the boat, and you must do everything I say, or you will have to walk the plank, said the older boy. And I'm shipmate, the chubby one floundered, trying to think of a pseudonym that would make him sound piratey, and with equal authority and rank, submitting that captain was already taken, and without knowing too much, as an alternative, he simply settled on the rank of shipmate. So when I tell you something, you have to say, aye aye shipmate. And you have to say, aye aye captain, when I give you an order. Do you understand? Yes, said the boy, eager to establish the rules in this new hierarchy. You mean aye aye, idiot, said Captain. The little one was trying his best to win over his new friends, so he concealed a shallow aye aye, ship captain, as he continued trotting along at their side. His gait was not as wide as theirs, but with a speedier natural step he was holding his own through the thickening growth. Before much time had passed, the well-worn cart track beside Murphy's field began to fade. Its once bare earth slowly swallowed by the increasingly frequent blades of grass. The tended fields, neat and orderly, grew gradually wilder, their edges fraying as an unchecked growth crept in around them. Even the narrow paths, once trodden smooth by frequent use, now struggled against the invasion of rough moorland grasses, their tall, coarse-hewn stems tangling and crowding the way. Captain picked up a branch, which was long and straight, reaching most of his height. You two need spears like this one, he proclaimed. "Aye, aye, Captain," said Murray, eager to please, as he walked slightly off the path towards the older trees, where he felt more likely to find suitable sticks with which to arm himself. The stocky shipmate took to the other side, walking slightly slower, doing the same, and quickly found a lengthy but crooked dried branch, which would do until he found better. "Ahoy, Captain! I see land ahead," he declared, pointing his crooked spear towards the rafters. Nobody bothered to point out that as yet they were still on land, as it suited the theme they were playing. Without thinking, they quickened their pace and broke into a moderate run, hurrying towards the river bank. Shipmate, however, began to feign a limp, deliberately slowing himself down. He had never liked running, and the fact that he couldn't even keep up with the youngest of them was more than a little embarrassing. So much so that he thought pretending to have a twisted ankle would be a convincing enough excuse. Using the spear as a walking stick to exaggerate the feint, he slowly ambled up to the others, who were already standing and staring excitedly at a raft some 15 feet away, crudely built by some other children, and tied to a long coarse rope bound to a tree. It was now stranded on the wide muddy banks of the river, as water levels must have dropped considerably over the past month. Captain probed the mud ahead with his stick before every cautious step, testing its depth like a man crossing thin ice. At first, it gave way only slightly, but the farther he trudged towards the raft, the more ground squelched deeper beneath him. Soon his boots were sinking 8 or 9 inches deep, with each sucking step plunging into the foul, bacteria-laden, pitch-coloured muck which hid beneath the sandy, lighter-coloured surface. Every time he pulled a foot free, the mud released a wet gasp, exhaling a sulphurous stench that reeked of rotten eggs and spent oils. "Follow my tracks or be taken by the quicksand," Captain said to a uniformed "Aye, aye, Captain" from the other two. Captain was already untying the raft and trying to get an angle on it towards the river's edge. The other two pushed from behind. Murray slipped, scraping his knee on the sharp stones and shells that lay beneath the surface, and started to cry. "Control yourself, man. Pirates don't cry," Captain said. "I don't think he's going to make it as a pirate, Captain." "He should walk the plank," said shipmate. "I'm not crying," Murray petitioned, rubbing his now muddy arms across his face, bringing the stink closer to his nose. He held back the tears like a trooper. Between the three of them, they managed to get the raft into the smelly, stagnant recesses of the canal and sat on it evenly, washing their mud-laden legs in the water until they were deep enough in the waters to start kicking to propel themselves. The tall boy stood at the front, wedging his stick into the riverbed in an effort to steer. Before long, the stick was all but swallowed by the depth of the canal, and they began to feel the current of the river that it led to, causing motion on the surface. "We need bigger oars, Captain," the stocky boy complained, as he lay on the raft, desperately trying to find the river bottom. With his arm immersed in the water and his stick at full length, he just barely felt it touch something resembling mud before it was swept from his hands. The raft began to gain momentum. Captain lay down with his stick full length and his arm now under water. He could feel no ground beneath. He desperately began splashing in the water and paddling, which had some effect, but nothing that could be considered effective steering. "Abandon ship!" Captain cried as he dove into the river. Joy appeared on shipmate's face at the thrill of jumping in. "Swim for your lives!" he screamed enthusiastically. But Murray did not share such joy. He couldn't swim, and now he stood alone on the raft, drifting away from his friends. He shouted to them in every way he could, but the splashing and enthusiasm were all they could perceive. By the time Murray was over 20 metres further downstream, They were just beginning to compose themselves on the bank. When they did notice, they ran downriver, trying to keep up, but the reeds and bushes became more frequent, obstructing their view as the river widened towards the deeper veins. Captain lurched into the reeded shallows, mud sucking at his boots as he fought nature's devices towards deeper water. His arms tensed for the swim to reach the drifting raft when the river bottom seized him. Thick silt clamped around his ankles like wet cement, and underwater reeds fastened him, trapping him, waist deep, as foul bubbles burst around his waist. The more he fought, the faster the muck swallowed him, first to his knees, then his thighs, the thick silt gurgling as it claimed him inch by inch. Every thrash only drove his feet deeper into the hungry muck, and before he knew it, he was the one in the most imminent danger. Shipmate, realising the seriousness of the situation, began to cry as he saw his friend, Colin, lurch forward while his lower half stayed behind. His clenched fist, still raised from cheering moments before, now hung limp at his sides as his friend's top half disappeared under ever-darkening muddy waters. He could hear the failing coughs and the splutters of Colin, and was frozen to the spot. Frightened and alone, he began to run home, wishing he'd never played out today. The river had long since disappeared from beyond the familiar bends where oak trees leaned over the water, beyond the gravel forest and far south of the veins. Fortunately, the currents held close to the coastal tides from there on. Otherwise, Murray would have been unlikely to have made it all the way across the azure ocean. Now the banks showed strange faces, rocky outcroppings, strewn intermittently with moss and barnacles. Beyond, there were hills that reminded him of his mother's legs under their blanket, where he would often curl up beside her. Many years before, his tears had dried into salty tracks on his cheeks. The sun had blistered his eyebrows, but the fear hadn't left him. It had only grown heavier, like the splashes of seawater settling into his clothes, drying, only to be sodden again. The salt was all that remained on top of the red, sore skin as evening drew in. That first day was hot and dry, and he was unaware he was drifting northward across the Pentland Bay. In thirst, he desperately cupped some seawater into his hands, and despite the salty taste, it wet his dried and desperate palate. When the raft finally caught on a sandbar, the light was bleeding from the sky in long streaks of orange and violet. Murray stumbled onto the land with legs that barely remembered how to hold him. His steps felt heavy and awkward after adjusting to the balance of him on the rocky raft. When opportunity arose, he dared to jump the last of the washes that wrapped around the uneven sands every time a wave was broken on the shoreline. The smells here were wrong. Wood smoke carried a tang of peat instead of applewood, and the wind brought the briny scent of a sea much wider than the veins. A fisherman mending nets nearby called out in a voice that rose and fell like song, but the words might as well have been chatter for all Murray understood. "Murray!" he offered when pressed, throat raw from disuse. The villagers clucked over him. Their rapid speech was peppered with familiar words twisted just beyond recognition. "Fair say be Murrican, be sounds," nodded a woman with callous hands that were crooked like tree roots, as if this explained everything. In their mouths, his name became something new. "Murrican!" 2 syllables that carried the weight of all the family he'd lost. They fed him starch bread, spread with pickled goat's cheese and grape, pressed a wool blanket around his shoulders, and spoke of sending word to the Murrays of Ireland. But as the seasons turned and no kin came to claim him, the name stuck. By the time he could mimic their lilting speech well enough to protest, he'd grown into the word like a second skin. The boy who drifted out from home became Murican of the salt-sprayed cliffs. Though some nights when the wind howled just so, he'd startle awake thinking he heard Captain's voice calling from the reeds. He vowed revenge on the boys that had sent him away.